Okay, everybody. So we are a small but mighty group here. This is the bonus call. We're talking about Wild Fit for vegans and how to make it work for you. So in the Facebook group, some people were saying that they didn't really feel like they were served, or that they felt how they knew how to proceed in living Wild Fit as a vegan. So I just wanted to make sure that you were heard in this space, that you had your questions answered, and that I can give you some support to the best of my abilities. So I was vegan for a few years, and before that I'd been vegetarian for a couple of years. And when I was a vegan, I met a former partner who was a hunter and a fisherman. So, and we were both studying environmental science in university at the time. So through the course of that relationship, what I grew to understand was that there was a very sustainable way to consume meat, and there was a very unsustainable way to consume meat. I was also learning about conservation biology and ecology and all of these different sciences surrounding the populations of not only animals, but the plants in their environment as well. And that each ecosystem has a very fine balance, right? And if anything is thrown out of balance, usually by humans, then an organism can exceed its carrying capacity, and then a whole species might go extinct or near the brink of extinction, and that creates like a snowball effect in that environment. So humans have been tinkering with environments for 100,000 years or more, and we can see that through the mass extinctions that occurred in North America and then South America when humans crossed over into those continents. So we see that very quickly those populations dropped off, and that's not changed. We're still bringing all of these species to extinction. So we want to emphasize that Wild Fit is very much a plant-based diet. We don't want the emphasis to be on meat. We don't think that that's sustainable. But we also know that huge tracts of land are now being cleared, not for soy for animals, but for soy for humans. And so we want to kind of tease apart all of the factors involved, the economics involved, and learn about how we can make the greatest positive impact with our diet choices without it negatively affecting animals as much as possible. Correct? So, in Living Wild Fit, not too long ago, I did a presentation for the vegans in that group. So I want to quickly go through that presentation just so I have some points, because we are a small group, and then we'll go into questions and things about recipes. Does that sound good? All right, so I've said a bit about it already. I'm going to share my screen. So can you guys see this okay? Pardon my tabs. I could do it in presentation mode, but let's just do it this way. So there's lots and lots of reasons to become a vegan. Some of you watching this are already vegan and you have your own reasons. Others are just considering becoming more plant-based. Maybe with starting with meatless Mondays, maybe you don't eat meat on the weekends, maybe you're just visiting more vegan restaurants when you're out of town. But of course, there's many reasons to make these changes that we're aware of. There's the obvious, like being compassionate towards animals, having ethics where we honor their lives, where we don't want them to live in these horrible conditions and have these horrible fates. Some people are vegan or vegetarian for religious reasons. Other people, it's becoming more and more, there's more and more awareness that having a diet with lots of meat can actually lead to being more unhealthy and have diseases like cancer and diabetes and so on. So there's tons of reasons. We're also really happy to report that, like if you search for resources about being plant-based vegan or raw vegan or anything like that in Google, often the real resources have been buried. You know, they're like 10 or 12 pages deep if you're going to find any of those resources at all, because the dairy board and the grain industry and everyone else is essentially buying visibility. And they're also paying to hide resources that might be useful to us when we want to learn about becoming plant-based. But the really good news is that some larger associations that are very visible are coming forward and saying, hey, you know what, dairy might not be the best thing for us. You know what, you probably want to be aware of the sources of your meat. Factory farming might have implications that are negative for our health, and so on. So that's all really good that we have these sources that we can then use to quote to our meat-loving friends and tell them, like, hey, this is not just propaganda, it's not just coming from a bunch of hippies, like this is serious stuff and we all need to be considerate of it. So in WildFit, basically what we want to have awareness of is how we're going to thrive as vegans. And it really comes down to our food sources, being aware of the specific nutrients that we need more of if we're not going to be eating any animal products, and making sure that there is enough variety and seasonality so that you're not getting too much of any one component from plants. Because plants also don't want to be eaten, and many of them have chemical defenses. So if you go gung-ho and you're eating way too much spinach or way too much broccoli or way too much anything, it can have negative repercussions. So we want to make sure that we're always having a wide variety of plants. So we're going to talk about how to do that. So the first thing that's really important to be aware of is that all humans are nutrient deficient. We're nutrient deficient because the soil that our food is grown in is not good for us anymore. It's lacking in a lot of nutrients. It's sprayed with like 3 major chemical components, but all of the micronutrients, all of the microminerals that we need are missing from the soil. So we're not getting those, and also a lot of the magic that's in the food that we eat is in that soil, in all of the microbes that are there, and the bacteria and the fungus, and like even some like old animal feces in the form of compost. That was all essential to our diets, but we don't eat that anymore. We don't eat it because most of the food that we consume is factory farmed. And if you were to eat the soil, you might be exposed to things like E. coli, right? It's a real problem in sanitation now. So we make sure that our food has been blasted with hot water and sometimes even bleached in some countries. So if you want to do something major for your health, find a farmer's market, start a garden. Even if you just have a windowsill garden, where you have some really healthy soil and plants growing in that soil, and you're getting in there with your fingers so that some of those microbes are getting underneath your fingernails. That is a really great start to a more healthy body. And always remembering that the best food is the freshest food that's right out of the ground. So a lot of us in the Northern Hemisphere, we're going into winter, but even still, you can get your root vegetables from a really good source. Try to get hydroponic vegetables that are organic, right? Doing the best you can with what you have to get those really good food sources. I already talked a bit about carrying capacity. So this is basically what we can think about is humans have manipulated the environment. So now we have these enormous factory farms. Obviously, the rainforest is still burning. We don't hear about it any longer, but there's still these huge fires that are going on. And those fires are intentionally set to clear out rainforest, to make space for resources for farm animals. So with the awareness of that, it's like, okay, this is a really good reason not to eat beef from Brazil, right? This is a really good reason to stay away from those kinds of cows. But what about all of the fast food restaurants that now have those Beyond Beef burgers, right? Like, yes, it's good that there is an option for vegans, but why does that exist? It doesn't exist because all the vegans stood up and said that what you're doing is wrong. And those huge industries and corporations were like, you know what we're doing is wrong. We shouldn't do this anymore. Let's be better people. Those options now exist to make them money, right? So what they've done is now they're allocating some of the soy from those plots of land to feed humans. So depending on where you are on the spectrum, you still want to have that awareness of how can I make the greatest impact? How can I vote with my dollars? So yes, it's good to have these options, but something like tofurkey, that's made completely of wheat gluten, right? A lot of these Beyond Beef burgers, they're made with GMO soy. So you still have to be conscious of what you're eating. And you still need to stand up and say, I see what you're doing. I see the marketing ploy that is happening here, and I'm not going to stand for it. So I know that a lot of you, this is what you're looking for. This is the preferred seasonal cycling for WildFit vegans. So this is what I found works for a lot of my clients, and I will just post this picture into the group. But basically, you want to be living in summer. You have lots of leafy greens. There's lots of those colorful vegetables to get a wide variety of nutrients. You have some of the less sweet fruits. So you're not totally feeding your sugar monster all the time, but you still have access to those carbohydrates. And then to a lesser extent, so this is foods that would be acceptable, but maybe more occasional. You would have some sprouted pseudo grains. So maybe some quinoa, maybe some buckwheat, amaranth. You could also be sprouting broccoli seeds or radish seeds or mung beans or things like this. So you're getting all of that potent baby plant protein in your daily diet. Organic alfalfa is another one that's very easily accessible, very inexpensive. You can get it in most grocery stores. So these are really good ways that you are providing yourself with a wide array of nutrients. People will say, well, what about legumes? Well, we said all along that chickpeas, lentils, and mung beans are our most preferred legumes. And the reason being is that you can sprout all of them. When you sprout them, you remove a lot of their anti-nutrients, right? So you make the nutrients that are within them more accessible to you. You're also not harming your digestive tract when you're eating them. And it's not just about the protein that something contains, it's about how your body can break that down and then build it back up into usable nutrients, right? So these three specific ones are the most easily broken down. And then, of course, there's some soaked nuts and seeds, which can be really good for your protein intake as well. So that's what you would be eating on a regular basis. And you could be soaking and sprouting those nuts and seeds and then making your own energy balls. You could be making your own protein bars. You could be using them to make like really nice, simple, low sugar desserts and things like that. So it feels sustainable in the longer term. And then you can cycle in those seasons of your fall. Oh, sorry, Josiah. Lentils, mung beans, and chickpeas, garbanzos. Cynthia, you're asking why soaked nuts and seeds. Sorry guys, for those watching the recording, I just pulled up the comments. So for a lot of our nuts and seeds, and for any plant, right? A plant wants an insurance policy to make sure that those seeds don't get digested by any animals. That's kind of the deal that we made. Like you guys maybe remember Eric talking about this in week 2, is we made a deal with some fruiting plants. And they said, okay, I'm going to be lazy and I'm not going to depend on the wind and I don't have legs. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to produce these brightly colored, really delicious tasting, nutrient rich fruits. And you animals are going to eat those fruits. And then you're going to carry the seeds somewhere else and you're going to plant them so that another plant like me can grow. But the deal is that you're not going to digest those seeds. So for anyone who experienced like some loose bowels and things happening in week 2 and 3 when you weren't used to eating a lot of fruit, that's part of the deal that we've made with those plants. They actually have specific sweeteners in them, like fructose, that make our bowels move more quickly. And that's something that the plant is doing because it wants you to walk away with the seeds, but not walk too far so that you digest the seeds. So all seeds have some degree of chemical protection. A lot of them have physical protection that we can see. They have a hard outer coating, but then they also have chemicals that keep what's within them dry and safe until they've been planted. And then when they're planted, the incredible intelligence of that nut or seed understands, okay, now it's dark, it's a certain temperature, there's a certain level of moisture, so now I can germinate and sprout and become a plant. When we soak the seeds at a certain temperature, usually out of direct sunlight, it mimics that environment. So we're essentially tricking those baby plants into thinking that they've been planted. So then they start the process of growing or sprouting, and all of those chemical coatings are removed, or most of them are removed, so that it can then become a plant without poisoning itself. So that's the reason that we do that. Getting back to the preferred seasonal cycling, so you have your maintenance season of summer, and then you're going to cycle into fall and spring for shorter seasons. So fall is for restoration. So maybe it's like 3 days, maybe it's like 3 weeks for you. It depends on how strong your sugar monster is, how much healing you have to do, how much weight you want to release. But this is where you really have a ton of root vegetables, lots of squashes, all of those sweeter fruits. And you're not so focused on getting as much of your protein or getting as much of your fat. You're really just loading up on all of those colorful fruits and veggies, knowing that at some point you're going to cycle into spring. Spring is your season of renewal. So maybe you do deep spring for 2 weeks and then a gentle spring for another 2 to 6 weeks, really up to you. But then it's just a lot of leafy greens, lots of bitter vegetables, higher plant proteins and those plant fats, and maybe occasionally some sprouted legumes. So one season, again, just as if you were eating meat, it has one season where it's mostly based on carbs and a lot of sugars. Your body needs those sugars to feed your brain, to build your hormones, to give you gorgeous skin, and it's going to store some of them on your body. But then you're going to cycle into spring, and then you're going to start burning fat and getting rid of some of that fat. So understanding that everything flows in cycles is what's really crucial here. And then, of course, if you want to do a fast, you can always do a fast with water, with some vegetable broth, or with your alkalizers. A lot of vegans will ask, well, what about supplements? What do I need to supplement? Do I need sublingual vitamin B12? Do I need to be getting iron shots? What do I need? Well, you really only need supplements to augment an already complete diet. Okay? So mushrooms are a really great source of vitamin D, which is a nutrient that's often missing in a vegan diet. Again, by sprouting our baby plants, so our nuts and seeds, we decrease the phytates in that, so then you can utilize all of that protein more readily. You can eat sea vegetables. That's a really great source of iodine, which is often lacking in a vegan diet. The jury is kind of still out on whether you can convert AHA to DHA through chia pudding, or chia seeds rather, but it can't hurt. Chia seeds are a really good source of essential fatty acids. There is some controversy going on about yellow fat disease and do we really need essential fatty acids, et cetera, et cetera. My take on it is that because these fats are so delicate, you really need to make sure that they are fresh as possible. So making sure that when you get these seeds that they smell fresh. They don't smell moldy. They don't smell rancid. They smell really good. Check that before you buy them if possible. And then keep them in your fridge. Keep them cold, keep them dark. And that's true for all nuts and seeds. You don't want them where the fat can be exposed to a lot of oxygen, because and a lot of heat. That's what causes it to oxidize and go bad. And then when you want to talk about iron, iron is hugely abundant in all of our leafy greens. We just want to make sure that we're getting some vitamin C with that iron. And thankfully, a lot of plants have vitamin C within them. But if you want to do a little bit extra, you can add some lemon or some lime to your greens, or lemon juice to your alkalizer. And that really makes sure that you can grab onto that iron and hold it within your body. Because with all of these nutrients that we get from our food, whether you choose to eat meat or you don't, you run the risk of being nutrient deficient. And that's why it comes down to, well, what's the source of your food? So are you getting it as natural, as fresh, as organic, as local as possible? And then making sure that your digestive tract is really healthy. Because it's not like you can say, oh, well, I need my essential, I need to make sure that I get all of my amino acids. So I'm going to supplement this and supplement that and supplement the third thing. If your digestive system doesn't work well, you are not getting those specific amino acids, right? Your body will take them in, but it's not going to hold on to them. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it will rebuild the exact proteins that you need. So that's why it's always better to use whole foods whenever possible, because they're already all in the proper ratios for your body to understand what it is and to break them down and then rebuild them into what you need. And it also helps to ensure the health of your digestive tract. So that's really what I would focus on. If we want to talk about supplements, that's something that you would do individually with a health professional. So whether you see a nutritionist, whether you see a naturopathic doctor, maybe you have a really great functional medicine doctor. But once you've been eating this way for a while, you feel like your digestion is improving, you can then get your blood work done. And they might tell you, oh, well, this is a little bit low. I'd like to see this higher, maybe this higher. And then you can talk to them about specific supplementation. It's really not a great idea to supplement anything, especially minerals, without the help of a professional. And here's why. Minerals each have a partner mineral. So like calcium goes with magnesium, zinc goes with copper. So, and so on and so forth. So when you supplement with too much of something without its partner component, you create instability in this wheel of minerals. So you could think of them all as being connected with cords. So if you thought, you know, I'm starting to eat a vegan diet, I don't have a lot of energy, you know, I saw on Dr. Oz that maybe if I didn't have energy, that might mean that I need more iron. So I'm going to have more iron. And then you supplement iron. Well, too much iron is then going to pull on certain cords in that mineral wheel. So then it'll bring other things out of balance. And then each of those minerals has cords attached to it. So it'll pull other things out of balance. So you're actually only going to create more problems rather than solving the issue. And you're going to make it more complicated to solve the issue. So really, I recommend that if this is something you're concerned about, that you talk to someone who deals specifically with these nutrients and can give you a plan moving forward. Now, this is what I heard most, and this is why I'm hosting this call, is people feeling like they are deprived when they're eating Wild Fit and doing it as a vegan. So it comes down to the question of, do you feel like you are a resourceful person? If you're a resourceful person, generally you're very creative. You have determination, you're passionate, you're curious about life, and you have a certain sense of resolve, right? You're like, oh, well, I have a problem. I'm not sure of the answer, but I'm going to find the answer. And if each of us becomes more resourceful people, it's not just useful in terms of our health, it's useful in terms of everything in our lives, because we then become natural problem solvers. We see the world in a different way. We see ourselves as being the hero of our own story. We take ourselves out of a victim role. So it moves from being, well, I learned how to live Wild Fit, but I still feel really deprived. I don't know what to eat, and it just turned out that I ate nothing because I didn't know what to eat. Whereas if you step into your resourceful role, you can say, I recognize that I'm feeling deprived right now. That means that I have a problem that needs solving. So why am I feeling deprived? How can I fix that? What's my solution? So when we come back to how do you become more resourceful with your diet as a vegan, well, what skill set is missing? So do you feel like you're a competent cook? If you're not a good cook, well, can you take a raw food class? Can you take a vegan baking class? Can you maybe start watching more YouTube videos about how to make vegan food or how to make raw recipes, right? Where can you learn? Where can you get more resources about that? Some people are like, yeah, I know how to cook, but it was never fun for me. Okay, well, use your tools, use your strategies that we taught you in week 1 and week 2. Who taught you you were a bad cook? Why is cooking not fun for you? What are your first memories of cooking? And it might be that you're a very creative person who would be a wonderful cook. It's just that when you were growing up, your mother made everything out of a can and vegetables tasted gross and you were never allowed to help. So you felt incompetent in your kitchen. So get to the bottom of what the issue is. Always be looking for your monkeys. So find vegan restaurants that are in your area and look for inspiration. Take pictures so that you can then make those things at home and replicate them. Talk to the servers in those restaurants. See if you can talk to the chef or to the cook so that they can give you their tips and tricks. Vegans are always looking to recruit more vegans. So if you say, I'm interested in this, can you help me? Most of the time, this community will say, yes, of course I can help you. Just tell me what you need. So these are all wonderful ways that you can become more resourceful as a Wild Fit vegan. And of course, we need this community to stay strong. I love that when I posted, I'm going to do this call, over 100 people said, yes, I want to be on that call. I don't know where most of you are, but at the same time, you said this was something you were interested in. So I hope that you'll watch this replay, and I hope that you'll take more of this information into your everyday life. And I really call upon you, all of you who did this challenge as a vegan, and you felt like it was doable, you felt it was enjoyable, you felt enlivened through this process, that you will help your other vegans and the people who want to become more plant-based. Help those who are struggling. It allows you to understand what you know a lot better, and it makes you feel really good. So let's make those community connections and keep them strong. So all that being said, I want to launch into your questions. So anyone who has something they want to talk about live, we could pretty much have a small conversation about it. Anyone here have questions or need some clarity on things? No? Okay. In that case, I will talk specifically to a couple of Juliet's questions. She said she couldn't be here live, but she has some wish lists. So could I talk a bit about essential amino acids, confused as to whether we can or can't get them through a varied plant-based diet? So this is where it comes down to your own personal nutrition, your own personal digestive tract, and are you open to eating some dirt? That's like if you pull a carrot out of the ground, can you like dust it off but leave it a little bit dirty so that you're getting all of those microorganisms and things into your body? A lot of our B12 meat eaters and vegans, like both groups, we're learning that we probably got a lot of our B12 from the microorganisms on the food that we were eating rather than the food itself. And when we eat animals, a lot of the B12 that they got was from plants originally anyway. And they got that from the microorganisms that were on the plants that they were eating out in the field. So if you're cool with eating some dirty vegetables, and you have a very wide variety of plants in your diet, you ought to be able to do very well and not get any deficiencies and not need any supplements. Now, I say that as a generalization. You should get your blood work done at least every 12 weeks as a vegan and make sure nothing is depleted. If things are depleted, try to supplement them with food first or food-based supplements before you go to inorganic or pharmaceutically created supplements, okay? Next question, I would very much like to regularly eat small quantities of grains such as couscous, quinoa, bulgur wheat, red, brown, wild rice. So I talked a bit about what grains would be more allowable, and those are the pseudo grains, things that are actually the seeds of flowering plants, but they look and taste like grains. So quinoa, again, amaranth is a good one. Buckwheat is a good one. Some rice can be okay. So I'm out on my patio, and there's a lot of dogs. And sometimes someone will walk by with a dog, and then it's like on that movie Lady and the Tramp, they all start barking. So if you guys hear that, I'm sorry, I apologize. So some rice is fine. And then with the other ones, like couscous is wheat, right? That's just a form of pasta. Bulgur could be okay. It depends on your food categories. It depends on how you've tested these foods and how they feel in your body. So you just want to be super clear for you as an individual. We've said grains are not a part of the Wild Fit diet. That doesn't mean that they can't be a part of your diet. You just need to choose how often they become a part of your diet and hopefully have that based on how they make you feel. Similar list for beans and legumes. We talked about that already. Wheat in particular is bad for the body, but what about gluten-free or sprouted wheat? So when it comes to all grains, grains are the seeds of grasses. So if you were 10,000 years ago, 20,000 years ago, let's say. You're 20,000 years ago, and you have to provide for your family. And it was a really dry summer. There wasn't a lot of food. Everybody's starving, everybody's sick, you have to find something to eat, all the animals have left. You go out and you see like this one random antelope and it's chewing on grass seed. And you're like, you know what, I'm so hungry, I'm just gonna eat it. So you break off the top of the grass and then you chew on those seeds. It feels good to be chewing. It feels good to be eating. When you swallow, it feels good to have something in your stomach. But if there were apples on a tree, or if it was that grass seed, which one do you think you prefer to eat? Which one do you think your teeth do better with? Which one do you think you get more nutrients out of? So eating grass seeds became a thing out of necessity. And then we realized that grass seed was already very dry by the end of the season. So we started harvesting it and keeping it around in case we had a really long, hard winter, in case we had too many children to feed, right? In case we needed something for the cow that we were going to slaughter, or, you know, whatever, right? It was a backup. And over time, it became something that we ate regularly, right? This was a gradual evolution. And as we started cooking it, it became easier to chew, but it was never our first choice. We have been taught by culture that it's our first choice. Like, I dare any of you, I dare you to go outside after this call, find some grass seed and eat it. Like, take a picture of you eating grass seed and tell me how enjoyable it is. Because when we ask about, well, why can't I have grains? I like grains, I want my grains. Well, what is it that you really want? Because they're not nutritious. They're not giving you good gut health. They're not giving you really clear energy. They might be creating inflammation in your tissues. So why is it that you want them? And if you're super clear, like, I just like them. I like chewing them. I like that heavy feeling in my stomach. I like to have a really big plate of food. I'm not really into weight loss. I actually want to just gain weight, so I want some empty carbs. That's fine, but just be super clear why you want them and make sure that the emotional charge is removed. Okay? Same thing for oats. Oats, a lot of people actually have trouble with. They're very allergenic. You notice, like, if you have some people, when they have oatmeal, or you have a very plain oat cake or something, that it creates an itching at the back of your throat and maybe in the back of your tongue, or maybe your throat even feels a little bit raw after you finish eating it. That's all, those are symptoms that that grass is saying, don't eat me! Like, you can almost see these grains like clinging on to the back of your throat before you swallow them and like throwing out all of these chemical sensors like, danger, 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 don't eat me, don't eat me. And then you swallow it and it's like, okay, you're gonna be sorry. I'm gonna make you pay. And then they do. But we've been so indoctrinated with this idea that we need them, that we then want to have them in larger quantities. So what we're saying is, you can certainly eat them if you want to eat them, but we've taught you what the optimal human diet is, right? We've taught you that. And now you have the foods that you just like. You just like them. You just want them. So now you have to find a place on that spectrum of where they belong, how often you're going to eat them. And if you start to feel really badly again, or you start to move away from the health that you experienced in the challenge, consider taking a step back from them or removing them a little bit. Juliet also wonders if vegans and vegetarians struggle more fully with flipping the switch because they are sugar adapted due to being so grain and legume dependent. Most people were previously grain dependent. That's just something that became a thing when we started being agrarian cultures and started farming. So I wouldn't necessarily say that it's more difficult to flip your switch, but you definitely need to be aware of getting healthy fats regularly from the plants that you're eating. And usually that comes down to having recipes, making sure that you have a few really nice soup recipes where you can just drizzle some sesame oil on top and sprinkle some sesame seeds. Making sure that you have a really rich and creamy ranch dressing that you can dip your veggies into. Making sure that you have some chia crackers or flax crackers and you're using those with a veggie dip regularly. So making sure that if it feels like, oh, all I'm eating is lettuce and I'm starving, well, why are you just eating lettuce? Like, no one said you just have to eat lettuce. So how can you make sure that you are giving your body enough fat so that it receives the message that food is abundant? If you're vegan and you're having trouble flipping your switch, it's probably that the body is not getting the message that there is enough fat in the diet that it can drop the fat that's on your body. It'll start burning that fat when it feels safe to do so. So making sure that, like, one of my favorite things to have when I'm in spring is I make, but you can buy an olive tapenade, and I have that with my flax crackers that I make. And it's so salty and so savory and so delicious. And that's like a huge serving of fat right there where my body is like, thank you. It's one of the things I eat my first day or so, and then I flip into ketosis in 2 or so days. And guys, I just for reference, I personally will eat meat twice a week. Like if I find some really nice fish, if I have some good chicken here in the Dominican, I don't eat meat hardly ever. I do eat a lot of eggs because I get them from Patrick, my farmer here. And I do eat some local fish that's really good, but for the most part, I eat plant-based. And I do spring well. I feel very well fed. And then she asks, her last question is it possible to consume too many greens? She was reading about thallium levels and that being a problem. So I will again just say that we want to make sure that you have a variety of greens in your diet, and that greens, like any plant, anything that has its feet in the soil, it pulls minerals up into the plant, right? Because the plant needs minerals to sustain itself as well and to build its tissues. So if the soil is really unhealthy, if the soil has a lot of heavy metals, the soil has a lot of chemical residue from pesticides, herbicides, and so on, the plants will pull those up into their tissues. So if you then in turn eat those plants, you will take in those toxins. So just be very cognizant, where is your food coming from? And how can you make better choices that way? Ensure that you pay attention to the dirty dozen and the clean 15. Again, those cleaner hydroponic sources, making sure that you have organic or local from a small farmer whenever possible. And that really helps with shifting what's on them. And then Cynthia is asking, does cleaning the veggies with white vinegar help a bit? White vinegar is very acidic, so it will help to clean off any of the bad bacteria that might be on those plants. So that would be good for dealing with E. coli and things like that. it doesn't help to remove any of the chemical toxins or heavy metals. I usually, you go like super acidic, so something like vinegar, or super basic, something like baking soda. And both of those help to clean the plants off, but they don't help clean up what they have become, because a lot of those residues then exist in the hydration of the cells of those plants. So I want to just talk with those of you who are here live about recipes, because I feel that that is the major thing that's been missing for many people, is the cooking skills and the recipes. So do any of you feel comfortable coming on live and giving some feedback about what you did for recipes and how I can help you in that regard? Nobody? Okay. In that case, Ashley, do you want to ask your question live? Okay, go ahead.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
Good. Yeah, I was wondering if you were aware of nutritionfacts.org and Dr. Greger.
Yes.
So he like makes very convincing videos and articles about why veganism is, you know, how we should be living.
Mm-hmm.
So while we were doing the program, sometimes Eric would talk and I would think about something that Dr. Greger was saying about like oats or just being vegan, and it wasn't confusing for me, but it's conflicting. It's conflicting for me because he makes like really good arguments about what grains can do for your body, but I know from my own experience like that they don't help my body. And then listening to you guys, listening to Eric, it makes more sense to me that you would have meat once or twice a week.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm still like a little bit conflicted in my mind about what the best way to eat is.
Well, because there's so much conflicting information everywhere, right?
Yeah.
Dr. Greger, he's an American guy, right? And he went to the Cornell University he went to a college of agriculture. Who do you think funds those colleges and their research?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the grain people, I'm assuming.
So would it be in his interest to say that grain is good if that's where he's getting his funding?
Yeah, I've never thought about it that way because he just seems like super educated, and like I kind of like in the same way as Eric, like I feel like Eric's never promoting something that's gonna like benefit anybody. He's like, here's all the information that I know and this is what I think is the healthiest. And that was how I always thought of Dr. Greger's information. But to put it that way, it's kind of alarming actually.
And it's not that people in their professional capacity are going out of their way to lie, right? They're not going out of their way to harm anybody.
Yeah.
But having studied science myself, and anyone who's studied science can tell you that there's lots of ways to skew the results of your studies and still be ethical about it, right? Like if you're looking for a certain outcome, you're going to do everything in your power to get that outcome, right? And you're going to redo the test and change around your variables and everything else until it looks like the result that you want. So with any of these studies, and especially when you have like a metadata analysis, and that's where they basically take a bunch of different studies and put them all together and then evaluate whether it makes sense on a larger scale.
Yeah.
If you've ever written a scientific paper and looked for all of these studies, it's very easy to find a lot of information that agrees with your point and a lot of information that can contradict that same point. So that's why it comes down to what feels good in your body.
Yeah.
What feels the best for you? What helps you to thrive? Because
Yeah. No, for me, that grains do not make my body feel good.
mhm,
I actually, I didn't let my older daughter have grains until she was 2. And then like after she was 2, I just let her have like a few things like sourdough or sprouted. And I noticed a huge difference in her belly. Like her belly was always super flat, and all of her, not all of her, but a lot of her friends had like bloated bellies. And then their parents would be like, oh, she eats like bread and cheese all the time.
mhm. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So it's we can always look at one side or another. People who are heavily invested in their side will always say their side is right.
Yeah.
One thing that I was really attracted to about WildFit is Eric has nothing to gain from people eating
Yeah.
WildFit, right?
Yeah.
He was so enamored with what he was able to do for his body that he wanted to tell other people about it. So that's why you can look at some people who are like hardcore paleo, hardcore keto, and they will argue against guys like Dr. Greger all day long. And we just kind of want to skip all that noise and just say, well, do it for yourself and see what feels good for you.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if some grains feel good for you, just be aware that it was a food of necessity. It was not a food that we would choose if we were given the option.
Yeah. I have one last question. So I have like some barley grass juice powder in my cabinet, along with probably like 50 other supplements, but I haven't touched any of my supplements since starting WildFit. But I really love the flavor of the barley grass juice powder, like just mixed in plain water. And so I was wondering if, because it's a grass and not the grain, if it was okay to consume.
So again, that would be one where it's like, because it's the grass plant, it's not a WildFit food, but if you test it and it feels good in your body, it gives you energy, you digest it well, then you choose when you want to include it in your living WildFit.
Okay, so even so grasses are not WildFit approved. I just kind of assumed that like green leaves were acceptable. So that's a good thing to know.
Yeah, for the most part, humans wouldn't really be eating grasses. Again, they might if they had to. Humans are opportunists. So we thrived because we could pretty much go wherever, climb whatever, do whatever. So with anything like that, I would just always say, try it out for yourself, follow your food timeline, see how it makes you feel. If it feels good, then for you, it fits in your living WildFit. For someone else, it might not.
Now I'm afraid to try things. I'm afraid to do the experiment, like what you're saying, see if it works for you. I'm like, that sounds like it's going to go bad. Like, so I don't even want to do it.
Not necessarily at all. This tool is like, I posted on Instagram the other day because I went to a birthday party and I had 2 glasses of wine. And I went into the bathroom and I noticed that I have scars from combo tree frog medicine. Anyway, these scars were bright red and my face was bright red and I had a rash here. And I didn't feel drunk. I didn't feel like any stomach pain. I didn't feel anything negative in my body. But looking in the mirror, I could see, wow, okay, this is not a food for me. This is causing a very negative reaction in my body.
Yeah.
Because it didn't feel bad in my stomach, I could have said, oh, well, it's fine. And I could have had a third glass of wine. But because I was getting very clear signs that this was, you know, alarming my system, I chose not to have it anymore. And now I know that that's below my don't line. I just don't drink wine because I can see how it affects my body. So it's not that you're going to be given shock therapy with any of these foods that you're testing. You are just becoming your own advocate. You're becoming your own expert. So that people like nutritionfacts.org or Dr. Greger or whoever aren't as important to you because you know what you want and what you need.
Yeah.
And that builds your personal integrity, that builds your self-confidence, and that makes your food angel a lot louder and your food devil a lot more quiet because you're in alignment, you're congruent with yourself.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
So Cynthia was asking, what about spirulina and nutritional yeast? So the thing about spirulina is it is pond scum, right? Like if you just, so here's what I do, and it's a really useful tool for me. I'm like, okay, so transport myself out of apartment into the jungle right over there, and I'm hungry and I don't have any food with me. What am I gonna eat? And if I were to see some scum on a pond, I probably would not go over and choose to eat that. I would probably think that's probably gross, that's probably festering with something that's been out in the hot sun, like there's probably some weird funky bacteria growing in there. It's not something that I would think of as food. Spirulina is very inexpensive to grow, and that's why we harvest it. Blue-green algae, generally, some of them, it seems like they are very nutritious. Some of them, they are very toxic. So it's a food product that, again, test it. If you like it, include it. It might be helpful for you. We don't think that it's necessary as a supplementation to a vegan diet in order to thrive. Nutritional yeast, I personally enjoy it. I eat it quite often in a lot of my recipes. The way that nutritional yeast is grown is there's like a sugary substrate. It's usually molasses. And then the yeast spores are put on that substrate and then they grow. So you are eating a microorganism, basically. Some people think it's tasty, some people think it's gross. That microorganism does have a good amount of nutrition. But for some people, again, they find that it makes them break out. They find it creates a histamine reaction in their body. So with anything that it's like, well, what about this? What about this? What about this? Test it and see how it feels. And if it seems to feel good, then include it until it doesn't, right? But just go slowly and surely as you're introducing things so that you don't end up back where you were before the challenge. So the last thing that I will say is recipes, especially for spring, is what people are looking for. So I have ideas that are like, so my olive tapenade was something that I make. I make a creamy edamame dip, and I have that with veggies. Edamame is obviously immature soy, so it contains a lot of those really good amino acids, but it hasn't matured to the point that the seed is protecting itself, so it doesn't have the anti-nutrients. So that would be a good one. Making yourself like a spinach dip that has a lot of coconut oil in it, or it's made with tahini, which is sesame seeds. So something like that could be really good. Making yourself, like I make a golden bread with cauliflower. So I buy cauliflower when it's on sale. I put it through my food processor, so it's in cauliflower rice form. I put it in freezer bags. I flatten the freezer bags and I stack them, and I put the date on them with permanent marker. So then I always will have some cauliflower that I can take out and use like flour. And one of the things that I make is golden bread. Golden bread has turmeric, which makes it golden, and it uses chia seed as a binder instead of eggs. So for anyone who's vegan, you might be familiar with flax eggs or chia eggs, basically a lot of baking and crackers and so on. They need something to hold everything together, something sticky. So those mucilaginous fibers work really well for that. When I'm in spring and plant-based, I eat a lot of soup. Spring is a very expansive season. There's a lot of watery greens involved, so it's easy to feel really cold. So the best way to combat that is eating stuff that is warm. So a nice leek and cauliflower soup, for example, or making yourself a curried squash soup with coconut oil might be really delicious and might be something that's good for you. Making, what else do I make in spring? I make things like chow mein. I make lasagna. I make casserole with eggplant. I make tacos, again with cauliflower. I use a lot of mushrooms. Basically, any of the recipes that are published on the WildFit blog, you can use mushrooms in place of meat, and it's really good. So in Living WildFit last month, the recipe that I submitted was caldo verde, which is kind of loosely based on like a Portuguese soup. It had Swiss chard, and a lot of, it had paprika was what I used, smoked paprika, and it called for chorizo sausage. So for meat eaters, that's great. And the vegans would be like, well, what would I put in there? Well, you would use lion's mane mushrooms, or maybe you would use shiitake mushrooms or something like that. So it still has that filling, fibrous sort of umami flavor, but everything else is vegan. So instead of looking at a recipe and saying, oh, well, that has meat in it as the main component, say, well, how can I use all of the flavors and all of the sauces and everything in this recipe and just substitute in a few key elements that will make it vegan? Does that make sense? So instead of seeing all the limitations, looking for the opportunities can be really good. So I think that brings us to time for this call. If no one has any final questions. Okay. Well, it's been great to see you guys live. I will post the recording in the group, hopefully after some more people watch the recording. They will maybe have some more questions. I will post the ideal ratios for being a WildFit vegan. Anyone who would love some more recipes, specifically say like, I want soup, I want dip, I want this. You can do so in that same vegan call post, and I can give you some recipes there. But I need to know what you like. This is what I do for any of my clients that I'm making a meal plan for. I'm like, I need to know what you like. I need to know what you don't like. I need to know your cooking level. So if you want something simple, you want something challenging. And I also want to know what you are familiar with. because if you're familiar with making burgers, it's going to be a lot easier to make chickpea burgers than it is to use chickpeas to make some extravagant something else, right? So start where you're comfortable and build your skills from there. So I can't help you if you don't ask. So make sure that if you still have questions or need clarification after this call, that you do ask those questions, because we want to move all of you from being deprived to being enlivened, to being resourceful vegans, so that we can be confident and spread this wisdom with other people so we can make more people plant-based. Right? Goals? Okay, good. Great to see you guys. I'll talk to you soon, okay?